And we talked a lot, you brought up a lot of comparisons with transportation infrastructure, highways, roads, tracks. So why don't we bring up another one, which is bridges? And it's clear that CBDCs and stable coins, I think, there's a lot of exploration with how do you connect the dots between obviously these different countries who are experimenting with CBDCs, how will they transact value between one another? The idea of bridge currency or bridge currencies being needed is certainly something that comes to mind. Can you explain, Daniel, what bridge currencies are in simple terms and what role they might play in the future, this future multi-CBDC landscape, if it does emerge? And what really does a bridge currency in the digital first currency world look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I probably won't be able to answer the last part of that question. I mean, I can make some general, I can give a general trajectory, but I probably won't be able to answer it accurately. I mean, a bridge currency, the definition is a currency that's an intermediary between two other currencies, right? So I want to move, let's say, Swiss francs to pounds. The question is, will I be able to do that one-to-one? Let's think it's not really a conversion, right? But will I be able to find someone in the UK that wants to take my Swiss francs, and will someone in the UK find someone in Switzerland that's willing to take their pounds? So the degree to which that connection can be made with an efficient pricing structure, there's really no reason for a bridge currency. Right, because you can trade this asset against this asset, this central bank money against this central bank money. The practicality of it, though, is that if you think about the number of different currencies and how much liquidity needs to be available to make those transactions, it becomes less and less efficient because there simply often isn't enough liquidity there. And when I say liquidity, what I mean is depth of the market. It means that if I want to now send, 100 Swiss francs, maybe I'll find 100 Swiss francs for pounds. Maybe I'll find a counterparty. But if I want to send 100 million, I may not find a counterparty. So there isn't enough liquidity, maybe between Swiss francs and pounds, for me to send $100 million every day. But there may be more liquidity if we pool all of our liquidity into one type of currency. Now, there's a historical context of how that generally comes to be, how that currency comes to be. But once you pool all that liquidity, you can create more efficient pricing structures, because you can say, okay, well, instead of looking for a counterparty directly, if I have the Swiss francs looking for the counterparty in British pounds, well, what I can do is just do Swiss franc dollar, dollar pounds, and Swiss franc dollar will have enough liquidity for my $100 million transaction, and pounds to dollar will have it. And then that currency becomes the bridge currency. So it's a very practical thing at the end of the day. It's really about liquidity. There's another side of it that also has to do with in what price are you going to denominate your assets. Everybody's heard about the petrodollar, so barrels of oil are being denominated in US dollars. Trade finance is generally denominated in US dollars. I mean, it's just convenient for everybody to anchor in one currency because it creates a common language. It creates a common hedging structure and risk structure. So it's really a very, very practical thing. When we look at multi-CBDC designs, and really what we're trying to look at is kind of diversification of these methods. So bridge currencies will always be there. They'll always provide a competitive exchange rate. They'll always be attractive. The reason they're there, though, is because of the deficiencies of creating sufficient liquidity, or the issues with denominating things in different asset prices because the conversion is so tricky. But if there's technologies that maybe mitigate some of those problems, I think it calls into question the relevance, the future relevance of these bridge currencies. So, I'll give you a hypothetical example. If in the future we have common platforms that are connected across economies that can solve this kind of liquidity issue between currencies, hey, if Swiss franc to pounds will give me a better rate if I do it directly against each other versus going through the dollar or the euro or the yen or any other rich currency, then that's what I'll do. I mean, it's a very, very practical thing at the end of the day. And the motivation for this is we hear a lot of things. I think, you can look at the digital euro that talk about strategic autonomy and payments. So wanting autonomy over their own payment systems. There's a general desire by most jurisdictions to denominate their assets. Think about government bonds, think about exports, things like that in their own price, because if you're denominating it in dollars, you're taking foreign exchange risk with your own exports in a currency that you have absolutely no control over. So there are very, very reasonable reasons to want to look at these type of tools more closely. And I mean, I can't really predict what the future will hold, but my sense is that there will be a more competitive, open, innovative approach to how we move around value. And I think that's kind of that would be really my only observation of the future going forward.
That's great. It's really fascinating. I guess my only follow-up to that would be what role, if any, I mean, you talk about bridge currencies, obviously, the USD has served that role primarily for a lot of different countries. Do you see a scenario where or what sort of value might digital assets, stablecoins, CBDCs provide in improving that role of the bridge currency? Do you see them being big game changers in terms of this idea of a bridge currency when, we have these digital assets in play more, and they're actually being, if they're being, more taken more seriously by the largest central banks around the world? Do you see them playing a serious role in those technological advances that might mitigate these problems?
So in supporting the functionality of the bridge currency?
Right. Yep.
It's interesting. I mean, I'll give you an example. We released this week a project called Project Mariana. And in this project, we looked specifically at, we envision a world where CBDCs exist. And we took 3 economies, Singapore, France, and Switzerland, and pooled their CBDCs in a common kind of offshore pool that was an automated market maker. And in that automated market maker, all the currencies could trade against each other. So I bring that example as like a serious departure from the way we think about foreign exchange today. Maybe, I mean, there's a lot of value moving around in the crypto ecosystem in that type of in these type of structures. Maybe that's something that's attractive for central banks moving forward, and we're really just starting to scratch the surface of those type of tools. So my intuition is that technology is only a part of it. Technology can open up new realms of possibilities. The US dollar isn't the US dollar only because of technology, right? It has many, many other facets to it. The depth of the markets, the rule of law, many, many things create the trust in the US dollar that you have that exists around the world. I think as the technology advances, and technology is a part of this, I don't want to minimize the technology component of this, but the technology in general is kind of equally accessible to everyone. Maybe there's slight variations in form factors. So my sense is that rising tide will kind of lift all the ships, and the competition will likely be in things that are a little bit softer. Let's call them. So, I don't think you decide which bills you use based on the fabric and the feel and what they look like. I mean, at the end of the day, it's where you live and what you have access to. But even if you could choose, it's more about which central banks you engage with, where you're doing most of your business activity. And that's the currency that you choose to deal in, right? So it's a very, very practical thing. So my sense is, I don't think it's a zero-sum game between bridging structures or direct structures. I think there's a lot of space for cross-border payments, and you asked about digital assets as well. So as we create more and more type of digital assets, as we maybe tokenize our deposits, maybe hold certain types of stable coins for payment needs that are very, very specific, my sense is that all of these things will bloom. A lot of times people think about currency competition, and currency competition is very, very real. Currency competition can exist between different forms of payment within an economy. Currency competition can also exist between different central banks and different fiat issuers. So currency competition is not a new phenomenon. Currency competition will continue to exist. Technology will probably make that competition more relevant and maybe even fiercer, but the beneficiary of this competition will be the users, right? And as long as we can keep the guardrails on, as long as we can not mess it up, right? And I think, when you think about the role of the BIS and the central banking community in general, right? That is the lens through which we look at things, right? This needs to work not just on the sunny days, but on the rainy days. And on the rainy days, that's the most important time where we test whether or not these type of things have the impact that we would like them to have. So I'm generally optimistic, and I think not looking at it as a zero-sum game is very, very important. There's no reason why your wallet, well, there is a reason today why your wallet can't hold 50 different types of currency. I'm not sure that there's a reason moving forward why it can't. And I'm not sure there's a reason why it can't provide real-time foreign exchange depending on what you are about to buy in the future as well, right? So just kind of open that up and say, oh, well, maybe we're actually looking at this from a relatively narrow lens, and the future of payments is much more interesting and exciting than just these tiny movements that we think about today.
That's a great way to end. Obviously, I want to get your answers to all these, but that was a great one to end on, I think. Mickey, any other last minute thoughts?
I think just one last question from me, I guess. I think a lot of, when we've been speaking, a lot of the points you've made, Daniel, have been compelling. I think there is lots of opportunities and issues to be resolved within global financial services, and CBDCs, as you've highlighted, offer lots of promise for resolving them. But as someone who's kind of on the sharp end and looking at the optimism, the potential, and so forth, what does a rainy day look like for you, right? What are in your kind of day-to-day thinkings and musings and work on CBDCs, right? What is the biggest worry you have or challenge you foresee, or the thing that you think this is the piece that we really need to get right to make it possible?
Great question.
Oh, great question. I may give you a less optimistic note to end on there, but that's okay. It's good that I only have 2 minutes to answer this question. So a couple of things right off the top. Cyber risk is huge, right? Cyber risk also exists today, but as we bring more and more payments digital, as we increase access, as these things penetrate our systems more, the cyber risk becomes more and more real. We just published a report called Project Sela. That was a joint project between the Bank of Israel and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and that was looking at retail CBDCs access versus its cyber risk. So cyber risk is going to be and going to likely continue to be a huge issue. Another issue that is a lot of attention is being paid to is offline. And when I think about offline, it's not I want to buy a sandwich on an airplane that doesn't have Wi-Fi. I'm talking about earthquakes, tsunamis, whole economies that are offline for an unknown amount of time with no previous notice. That is not a simple thing to solve, and that is definitely a rainy day that needs to be thought through carefully. Privacy is another huge one. So there's a lot of reason to I don't want to say to be concerned, but there's a lot of reason to design privacy in payments very, very, very carefully. There needs to be trust that's built there, and privacy is a tricky topic because it's not just privacy at large. It's privacy of what and from whom. And if you sit down and think about that carefully, you very quickly come up with an entire matrix of privacy issues that need to be very, very carefully managed and very widely across jurisdictions as well, which may make cross-border payments a little bit tricky. The last thing is maybe a little bit of a curveball. A lot of people talk about interoperability, and interoperability is generally thought of as connecting disparate systems. And they speak of it as it only is positive. The more things are connected, the better, because we get more efficiency. When you think about your rainy day question, when you think about risk and risk spillovers, we just had the collapse of a couple of big U.S. banks. And one of the big things that we looked at the BIS was, what is the risk contagion of these type of things? And is it contained within certain economies, certain tiers of banks? So interoperability is really good, and there's a lot of force driving for interoperability. But what we need to make sure is that there's proper breakers in the system so that we don't have risk spillover, so that a bubble here doesn't make something else explode on the other side of the world. So maybe those 4 points are some some things that need to be drilled down a little bit more. And, we have a lot of work cut ahead of us, and we need the best and the brightest. So this has been a wonderful journey between the public and the private sector that I'm really looking forward to driving more.
Yeah, what
back
fun
to our
work
road
be a part of.
analogy.